Hello and welcome to Education Today. I'm Jonathan Zish, School and Community Relations Coordinator for the Armstrong School District. First, I'd like to thank everybody at WIUP-TV for airing this broadcast. Today we're going to talk about how kids develop skill with numbers, which is also called numeracy. Our guests today are math leaders in the Armstrong School District who have a passion for math. Both of them provide math teachers with new and fun ways to make math more understandable for students. First, we have Barb Carnahan. Barb is the district's elementary math coach. Also with us is Larry Robb. He is the district's coordinator of K-12 mathematics. Barb and Larry, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, John.
Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Start with Larry.
Well, my background is in mathematics. I was a math teacher 8 years. My degree's in mathematics and actuarial science. I got into teaching in 1991, started at Du Bois High School. It's a little up north from here. Taught there 5 years, and then went to Kiski area as a math teacher for 3 years, and then became an administrator down there for 2 before coming to Armstrong School District as a principal at West Shamokin. Then the previous 2 years I was at Katanning High School as principal until I got placed in this position this year.
Tremendous. Barb?
I'm a graduate of Ellerton High School many years ago, and I have an elementary background, and then I went on for graduate school in elementary and middle school mathematics, and then I've had this job about 5 years now.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Today we're going to explore number skills starting in kindergarten and looking at how they continue up all the way to high school, even to AP Calculus. What we have is a special treat. We have some footage about the unique ways that students are learning math across the Armstrong School District. Larry, would you please tell us a little bit about the footage as it rolls?
As we take a look at the clips from our 3 different levels, our kindergarten classes, our 6th grade, and then our high school level, you're going to see some skills that are really built upon themselves and how they're expanded at the different levels, but also boiling it down to those specific skills that are used K-12. For example, in the kindergarten class, the students are asked to sort and look for patterns within the buttons that are given. And then you'll look at the 6th grade clips, and as you're viewing the 6th grade clips, you're going to see that the students, again, are looking at data, using some manipulatives to explore patterns, and then once they've seen the patterns, they're asked to justify what they found. They're asked to organize it within tables, which was a real nice thing in that class also is the mathematical justification that was going on between partners. Then as you moved on to the high school level, students were looking again at data and plotting that data using the graphic calculator and then analyzing it and coming to see that it was really a sine function and that sine curve that was made. But as you jump back down to the kindergarten, really they're asked to do very similar skills in the fact that they were looking for patterns also. So what we're trying to promote, and what our teachers are doing a very good job of in these 3 clips, is looking at patterns, looking at relationships, discovering patterns, relationships among data, among physical objects, and then being asked to come to conclusions about that, organize it, and then be able to justify what they found, and then hopefully drawing conclusions about that and be able to generalize that within the topic area.
That was amazing. We saw everyone working with different materials, and I thought it was very nice how we showed it across the grade levels. Would one of you or both of you explain what was the purpose of each activity? How did all of these tie together back to numeracy?
Well, with the kindergarten activity, first book was read called The Button Blocks, and the students, and that's the way a lot of things get started in mathematics in the primary, reading a book and get them interested in it. Then with the buttons, there was an assortment of buttons by shapes and different colors, and you can do many things by sorting by patterns, sorting by their shapes, sorting by their colors, and then you can do some simple addition and subtraction facts with that. So really the main part was looking at the patterns, because we do extend that as we go on into different grades. Mr. Spencer's 5th grade class was looking at snap cubes and working with them, trying to find what numbers are prime and what makes them prime by only having 2 factors. And then that carries on into the high school activities.
Yeah, Mrs. Lasher's class are using graphic calculators on a weekly basis, not a daily basis. And the value of graphic calculators is that students are able to look at many different, let's say, equations in a short period of time. And again, we're looking for patterns, we're looking for relationships, and they're able to model data in a variety of ways, through tables, through equations, and graphically. So I think it gives the students a better overall feel of really what mathematics is. It's just not a bunch of numbers, but it is the relationships and how those relationships interact with each other. So they're looking at different types of problems or settings or data, they can see it in a variety of ways.
You know, sometimes you hear people say, you know, that math is just a bunch of rules you have to memorize before the big tests. How do you both feel about that?
Well, you do have to follow rules eventually, but to get to that point, I think you have to build understanding and understand the concepts that are behind what the things that you're doing. And then there are rules to follow, just like with anything.
Yeah, mathematics gets a bad rap sometimes as a bunch of rules, but really mathematics is really a science of relationships and patterns. And as you go up through the grade levels, those patterns need to be established. And really the algebra itself is that study. How does that generalize to the whole number system? How do those patterns work? How do they interact with each other? And how can we represent those in a variety of ways?
Well, how about now, what if we took a look at how some of these, you know, math concepts are taught at different grade levels?
A lot of times in the primary, the activities are very hands-on, meaning the kids get to touch the things and move them around, manipulate them. And a lot of times it's started off by a book to get the interest up. One of the books is called The Greedy Triangle. It's about shapes, and you can use that in kindergarten up through 4th grade at different levels. I like to use it at the kindergarten level because then it talks about the different shapes. And when we're talking about patterning, you can look at, we have different types of shapes here. So the kids can set a pattern by putting a hexagon, a rhombus, a square, and then continuing that pattern with a hexagon, another rhombus, and a square. So they should be able to continue the pattern once that it's established that this is a pattern and it continues on and on. Another type of book, and this is the one we saw earlier in the clip with Paul Tracy's kindergarten class, is called The Button Box. Now, when you have things at home, the more different they are, the more interesting it is, because if you can see the buttons, there are squares and rectangles and ovals and hearts and stars. That helps develop the vocabulary for the students, and they're recognizing the shapes. And then these buttons are different by not only their shape and color, but the number of holes. Some of the buttons have 2 holes and some have 4 holes. So this is what we were using in that activity. You can go by patterning, you can sort them by colors and decide how many are, which has the most color. And anytime you would scoop some out, then the activity changes because you never get the exact same amount at the same time and the same number of the exact same objects.
Oh.
So the patterning does continue, and this goes up through Larry's activity.
It's real important that we establish these type of skills in kids when they're younger, because when you get to middle school or intermediate school, middle school, high school, kids really have to be used to looking and exploring things. For example, the one I have for you today, this is just an activity you can probably start with a 4th grade class. And what I'm asking them to do here is take the number 1, 2, 3, add it to itself, and then multiply it by itself. So we get a nice table, which helps them organize and also see data in terms of a table form. And what we'd ask kids to do then is look just for patterns among the columns, and then between the columns. For example, they're going to see that, for example, over here in the product part, that the difference between 4 and 1 is 3, then it goes 5, then it goes 7, so they can start establishing, again, looking for patterns. Then the other thing I would have them do with this type of problem is then model this. And I have an example here of how I would ask them to, these are snap cubes, how they can model it. And I really think this gives a better representation visually, and they can start seeing different types of patterns. And what's real nice about this is just 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, is we're doubling a number. As you look through here, and we look through, kids are going to realize that really what we have going on here is a line. And this is getting down to an algebra concept that will be established a little later on in their career. But what we're trying to do here is plant the seed. And the same thing over here with this problem. It's good to compare and contrast these. This is going to end up, if you see, it's not a constant change over time. Now, this gets bigger and bigger as it goes up. And really what you have going on here is a curve. And again, kids at the 4th grade level can see and visualize this. And again, it plants the seed later on when they get some of these concepts in algebra. And as we go up through, a good example, we can represent this as we go on later on in their mathematical career. graphically, we can do model with some physical items, we can show it as an equation. In this case, this is really half the equation, or half the graph would be a parabola, or we can represent it in a table form. And then again, it shows that relationship. So again, giving kids the opportunity to look at data, analyze it, and then represent it in multiple ways really makes those connections between and among math concepts, which is going to create that depth that you need. So as you strand these concepts starting at 3rd, 4th grade, they really have a connection to what's happening in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, and even some higher mathematics when you go in and you're looking at the graphical representation. But the point, again, I want to reinforce is it starts way back when they start doing these type of patterning and studying these patterns way back in kindergarten, setting that base so they're used to doing those sorts of things.
Very nice.
Thanks.
Larry and Barb, that was amazing. Thank you for bringing those to the sets and sharing with us those activities. I was wondering if we could take things back to where it all begins, the primary grades. What are both of your goals for the youngest mathematicians in the Armstrong School District?
Well, of course you want to develop their skills, and that starts even before they get to school with parent involvements. But you want to get them to understand the concepts, but mostly at the younger ages you want them to love math and think that math is fun.
Sure.
When we talk about number sense with younger kids, we're talking about their ability to look at numbers and take them apart. You know, look at 5 and see it as 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 2. Be able to take objects like the buttons that we saw earlier in the program, where students can play around with those and explore and start building those connections between concepts. You know, and that's real important. And I know we're going to talk some today about what parents can do at home, and that's very valuable.
Can you both show us an example of how about how hard math concepts at the high school are directly tied to number skills in kindergarten?
Well, we've talked a lot about patterning in any of the preschool classes and in the kindergarten classes too. They do simple patterns with following by colors, maybe green, blue, and then continuing the pattern. And that's a pattern that activity goes on up. Also, they can skip count in the primary grades by 2s, 5s. That's following a pattern going on up too, and that leads to algebra.
Right. As you go up through the continuum of the grade levels in the curriculum, we're trying to establish the different skills that the students are going to acquire each of those years. And for example, with multiplication, you look at factors, which leads back from skip counting. As you go through, you look at factors and multiples that way, and that ties directly into algebra. And the concepts you're trying to tie back is rooted way back in elementary school, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade.
And with algebra too, they are doing algebra in kindergarten because algebra is looking for the unknown, and when they have 2 plus 3 equals the box that's usually on a worksheet, the box, if you put a letter in there, that is algebra. So kids are doing kindergarten algebra.
I never thought of it that way, but I guess that's so. Parents hear they're supposed to read often to their young children to teach them literacy. Should parents also be thinking the same way about numeracy?
Yeah. The activities you do at home with your children, whether they're planned activities or they're just in your day-to-day activities, that your conversation with your children, mathematics you need to keep in front of your head. For example, when I take my children in the car, we're always looking for patterns and shapes. We're looking for the next 5 minutes, let's count how many circles we can find. And as a 4-year-old, they can do that. You can start identifying shapes. You can start identifying, what's the most colored car you're going to see. So we start looking for colors. We saw more black than white cars or whatever. So I think that establishes, again, real early that math's out there in life.
And I think also too that when you're out and you're shopping, they see numbers, you need to point that out, what's going on. If you're writing a check, that involves math. If you're adding up the total of your bill, if you're paying for something, that involves money and numbers. So they need to see that it's part of everyday life, and I think if you involve them in that, then they do, and it's natural to them, it's not as frightening.
And one activity I've done with all my boys is they've grown up, they collect animals. And we always take the time to sort the animals. We put farm animals here, jungle animals here. Then the next time we put red animals or yellow animals together. And then we look at what animals can be in both sets. So you start looking at intersections of sets, and they start looking at different characteristics. And that sorting skill is very important, again, as they go up through their mathematical career to do that later on.
Larry, you've talked a lot about the importance of math really is just understanding relationships and patterns. But I've heard you talk about another dimension, persistence. How does persistence fit into math success?
Well, there was a study done in 1999. It was called the TIMS study, video study, which went out and taped classrooms in the United States and 5 other countries. And they were really looking at how the students and teachers were interacting with each other. And one thing they found a little different in the United States was the students' inability to persist through a problem. We didn't provide them enough time to struggle, because struggling is part of learning. And we wanted to jump to the raid very quickly. And I think that's the detriment of the student if we don't let them pose problems that they're going to struggle, and they're going to have to look at different solutions, different ways to solve that problem without us jumping in and trying to save them. You know, not all problems can be solved in one period or with one class setting. So it's important that we let students struggle through problems and then help them sort it out as we go, but we can't jump in too quickly.
Sure. Would you like to give some additional ways, easy ways parents can help their children learn math and number sense at home?
Absolutely. I do a lot of parent workshops and have done them in the past, and parents are always saying, what can I do to help? So I've come up with some things that you don't even have to go out and buy things. It's things that you have around the home and some of the daily routines that you go through. As they're getting dressed and they're buttoning up, ask them how many buttons they've buttoned, or working with which is your left shoe and which is your right shoe. Just things that you go through normally. Setting the table for dinner. You need 1 fork for everybody. How many do we need? Or how many pieces of silverware are there all together there? Just counting out very simply like that. Using household things, I brought some goldfish. They have by colors, Skittles or M&Ms. You can do sorting activities. You can do graphing activities. You could pour out some in their hand and just say, how many do you think are there? And then count them out and help them count to see what they have. Any kind of blocks or toys you have, like Larry was saying with his boys, sorting what you have at home. You don't always have to go out and buy things in order to work with math with your children.
Another important thing is encouraging your child that math is something they can do. Not taking the attitude that math's only for some people. There's a math gene or something like that. That isn't something that needs to be reinforced. Every child can learn mathematics. I really believe it starts at a young age, and encouraging and doing the activities like Barb says really starts. That's a number sense at a young age that will then go on through the elementary and high school levels.
So we as parents, I guess, have to be careful how we are around our children, not to say, I'm not a math person. And there really is no such thing as a math gene. And I'm glad you addressed that point. Here's a part of math that seems to be coming on strong. Students as young as first grade are being asked to explain how they arrived at answers. Why are students being asked to do this, and what's the benefits?
A lot of that is, especially in the younger grades, being oral in their language and using the correct words and descriptions helps them clarify things in their mind. And if they have to explain and they're asked, how did you get that answer, or how did you do that problem? And if there's something that's wrong with it, then that can be fixed and the understanding can be corrected later on. Because if you don't know what's going on in their heads, then you may think that they know what they're talking about with an answer, but in truth they don't have the whole big picture of what the concept is.
And encouraging communication between the teacher and the student, or the student and the student, again, builds that math fluency. It makes them, as Barb said, talk about it, explain themselves. And that's just a fact of life. We're all required to go out and explain ourselves, whether it's math or whether it's any other thing that we're dealing with in a job situation or at home. So being able to do that's a valuable skill, whether it's in math or not.
Definitely. What's your advice to parents who might have a child who's struggling to understand math concepts?
I think if they feel that they're struggling, always communicate with the teacher, because to see if they're seeing the same kinds of things, and then if they are just going back to the rules and following the rules, that they may have to go back to the beginning, and it's not babyish that they're going back to using manipulatives, because some people are very visual and seeing it laid out one way or trying to approach it and teach them or show them a different way, it may click for them. So never give up and just say they don't understand it, because there's only one way. Try to think of a different way, or talk to the teachers.
Right, it's real important that we don't, if a student is struggling, let's say example with some math facts, that we just don't keep drilling them with flashcards. As Barb said, we have to take a step back and really deepen their understanding through the manipulatives, through some concrete exercises.
Well, I really appreciate you guys sharing all these informational and activities that you've done to show how math is being taught across the district. Barb, thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for having us.
Larry, I appreciate
Thank
your
you, John.
insights very much. And that's our show for today. I'd also like to thank Ed Bauer, who teaches television production classes at Katanning Senior High School, and his students for doing a great job as today's crew. For March's programming, high school students from West Shamokin and Elderton will be behind the cameras filming the program. So please join us again next week for another look at the Armstrong School District and how we are on the move, working with the community for you and your children. Until next time, have a safe and enjoyable week.
To support the core reading and math curriculum, teachers received extensive training on the Plato learning systems, which included full-day sessions as well as building-level support utilizing technology mentors. Through the Plato learning systems, teachers created specific learning pathways for students to maximize learning opportunities and began to analyze ongoing assessment information to make instructional decisions to ensure student success.
Hello, I'm John Zish, one of the hosts of Education Today. Here's a look at what we have coming up in our next batch of shows. The week of March 14th, we'll show you a student-made video that gives creative advice about the state exams coming up in April. The week of March 21st, we'll look at the very high-tech Penn State Electro-Optics Center, which got its start in 1999 in the West Hills Industrial Park along Route 422. The week of March 28th, we'll look at the new face of physical education with Katanning area middle school teacher Lisa Heilman. Phys ed is not just about sports anymore. In some cases, students are reading and writing in gym class. The week of April 4th, we'll talk with two Ford City High School teachers who have spent a few Saturday mornings preparing high school students for the new SAT. Students from television production classes at West Shamokin and Elderton High Schools will be our film crew for these 4 shows. For details, keep an eye on the community marquee at WIUP-TV, Channel 20 Adelphia, which carries our program. You can also check the Armstrong School District website at www.asd.k12.pa.us for updates. Until next time, have a safe and enjoyable week.